How's everybody doing? Still up? Good. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are in master's programs? Vast majority. How many of you in PhD? Just to give a show of hands? Yeah, well, smaller group. You've obviously come through a master's program, or maybe you've been accelerated into a PhD program, and you already know some of the ropes, but I'm not surprised there's mostly master's students here. How many of you are from Newfoundland? Don't know why that gets a laugh, but how many of you from, as we like to say, Canada, not Newfoundland? Okay. How many of you from somewhere beyond Canada, outside Canada? Okay, so pretty evenly divided between Canada and non-Canada, with a good, healthy showing here of Newfoundlanders. Well, welcome, and thanks to Dr. Kachanowski and Dr. Reynolds for their greetings. I echo everything they've said. You are quite privileged to be here. We're privileged to be welcoming you, indeed, and we hope that at the end of your program, in good, timely manner, when you complete, we'll be shaking your hand and hooding you and smiling broadly and taking your picture and posing with your family and showing off all your accomplishments. I think the experience of graduate school really stays with one. It's a very informing experience, all the highs and lows. It's very, very intense experience because it's coming at a point for most of you in your lives where you're shaping up all of your life's ambitions and your identity in constant formation. Not that that stops, mind you, but certainly it's in an active growth period during this time. I'm wearing two mics, I should add, and I've got two packs behind me, so I'm gonna move around a little bit, but I'm conscious of the fact that the camera's there. I admire Dr. Reynolds is wearing her green t-shirt. I think with the packs, it just makes me look too fat, so I'm not doing that. And you know, I got the camera. I want to welcome all those students too. We're not streaming this live, but we will be putting this up as a webcast on our site very soon. And I'm going to welcome all the students who are watching this at whatever time they're going to be watching it, including Grenfell students. At our other campus on the West Coast, we have an incoming group of master's students in environmental studies, environmental policy, and I haven't met them yet, but they're joining a small cohort that came last year, first program there in graduate studies. So welcome, all of you, if you're watching this webcast at some point. I too want to echo Dr. Kachanowski's gratitude to all the volunteers, all the student leaders who are here. President of your student union is here, Joey Donnelly, and Ashley Forstall, who has been instrumental in sweating every single detail, I can assure you. She does this every year. As soon as this is over, we start planning for next year, start evaluating. So it is pretty much of a 12-month-a-year operation. It's all meant to look really easy, but of course there's lots to think about. I'm going to take you through a couple of tips, I guess is the best way of putting it, for success in graduate school, things to avoid, things that you might anticipate having to confront, and maybe giving you some advice. And you might remember as you go through some experiences that you heard some of these lessons, if you will, and might encourage you or reinforce you to confront them in ways that you might not have thought at the outset. I always like to begin with this slide because it's one of those completely contrived propaganda pieces that we have at Memorial. One of the images that probably got you here in the first place. Yeah, it's right in front of our building. Does anybody really sit like that or look like that? I guess part of the message is that you know, don't believe everything you're going to hear, everything you're going to see. Everything I'm telling you today is absolutely true, of course, but I always find this particularly comical way to introduce this set of slides. What I was just talking about before, it's the kind of unformed you that will be filled in, one hopes, by the end of your programs. And I remember very vividly that sense, certainly as an undergraduate. It doesn't go away. Some ways it gets intensified, that sense of uncertainty about who one is and what you want and what you're doing and whether or not this whole experience is going to be valuable for you. It's just a kind of queasiness. I think we've already heard that it's likely that you're feeling kind of certainly expectant about what's going to happen to you or what adventures you're going to pursue over the next few years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's hope not too many after that. That face will be filled in, no doubt. I'm not sure whether the master students in particular are aware of this fabulous resource. It's a comic book or graphic website by Jorge Cham. He's a Stanford University engineer, graduate who's turned an entire life into being an illustrator. And he's been here at Memorial a couple of times. He's kind of a superstar in this world. But if every day he's got a new comic, or almost every day, and if you use it as your guide, you'll find a lot of reinforcement for the kind of things you're going through. I particularly like this one, especially at this moment in this morning. If you can see it, this is Jorge's sort of idealized life plan. Probably has something to do with how you see yourself too. Go to college, meet a soulmate in college, finish college, go to grad school, get married, pass your qualifying exams, choose a thesis topic, defend the thesis, write the thesis, land a dream job, buy a house, publish books, get tenure, have kids, win prestigious career awards, live happily ever after. That happened to me, except it took a few marriages to get there, but that's another story. Don't know you well enough to tell you all about that, but anyway. But, you know, pretty much, I don't have any kids that I'm aware of. That's another thing. But I think for Dr. Kachanowski and Dr. Reynolds, probably something not unlike this career path. Not so sure this is so easily available anymore, and I'm sure most of you are not here because you want to have an academic job. Most of you are here because you want advanced skills to take you into a healthy labor market. And you're wise to be here to do so because all the research points to that likelihood. So I'm going to talk about something for a few minutes that I'm sure you will confront. You would not be human, normal, or identified as a grad student if you didn't confront the very essence of the condition of being a grad student, and I'm sure you're already familiar with it from having been an undergrad at some point in your life, recently or otherwise. And it's about procrastination. And Jorge Cham has really turned his whole shtick when he lectures into a kind of huge rationale for the value of procrastination. I'm not going to go there. He, of course, ended up, because of procrastination, not getting an academic job and becoming an illustrator. Not sure that's everybody's pathway, but the fact is that very, very few, it's a very rare student, very few of us ever avoid procrastination, especially when you have assignments and deadlines. In fact, one is always suspicious of the student who gets things in on time. These are people who one generally doesn't like that much in one's grad cohort because they seem to possess a gene that comes from some alien environment. The causes are clear, of course, laziness, well, we all know that. Fear of failure, which is an interesting element, of course, in the graduate student experience because you're now in a much more competitive environment than you were when you were a superior undergraduate student. Now, of course, the playing field is more or less leveled, and of course, perfectionism, which is also partly why you're here as well. Of course, Dr. Reynolds was saying, you know, don't have a fear of being imperfect. And I guess part of what grad school is all about is becoming a kind of perfect, imperfect being. And so if you remember that, perhaps it'll get you through, or at least help you acknowledge the fact that you are procrastinating, or as my husband likes to say, dusting the ceiling as often as possible. Procrastinating takes many forms, and of course, this is the very worst example of what happens when you do that. Study habits. One of the ways, this always gets a laugh, it's a cheap shot, but it's, I don't know, can you do with a laptop like that? But that is a book, by the way. That's a book, hardcover, bound. You know, study habits, very important. Disciplining yourself is part of what it takes to confront procrastination. You all know this. This is a really banal observation, but you will find that time management is the key to being a successful grad student. Learning how to juggle things when you have too much time and too long ahead, or too late a deadline, if you will, it looms too much ahead in your future, you find you fill the time in wasteful ways. You know, as they always say, give a busy person work and you'll get something done. Another element of your graduate student experience that's going to confront you sooner than perhaps most of you wish is public speaking or speaking aloud. You know, as an undergraduate, it's easy to hide and to remain, if you will, kind of invisible in the classroom, small or large. There isn't a great deal, with few exceptions, imperative to speak up. But most people, certainly in our world, have an enormous, practically pathological fear of public speaking. And they say that next to, you know, fear of death and fear of, I don't know what the third thing is, not having enough sex or something like that, that public speaking is right up there. And it's all about practicing, right? And grad school is the place. Grad seminars, grad classrooms, the grad social experience, as well as the learning and intellectual experience is where you have to confront that. We all want to be really good public speakers. We all know them when we hear them. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens years of flexing your larynx, if you will. Another element of this photo really speaks to a lot of things that grad students will confront, in addition, of course, to public speaking. It's related to that fear of exposing yourself as being imperfect. I can tell you that fear never really goes away. All you're really trying to do is master the fear, understand it, you know, to go through the various steps that help you recognize it. I'm sure my colleagues here would say that, as I do, the dreams that haunt, that sort of recur in your life, and they're kind of classic archetypal dreams. Many of them are informed by the experience in grad school. The fear of kind of showing up for a big public event like this, you know, in your underwear. It's a classic dream, or the fear of showing up to the wrong room and nobody's there, or showing up to the wrong exam. You know, you're facing chemistry when you're actually a linguistics student, or all of those kinds of fears of missing the opportunity or being exposed as inadequate or completely disassociated or disconnected from the task at hand. This is not an uncommon experience. You're going to have it. Again, it's how you get over it, how you face it. And those who survive well in graduate school are the ones who really do get to face their fears, if you will, and take some risks. Another really critical piece of the graduate student experience is what we commonly call imposter syndrome. And again, this doesn't really go away, not if you're any self-respecting, thinking human being. It is really about the sense that you have risen, if you will, or you're in a space, learning environment, intellectually challenging environment, task-oriented environment, and you don't have the goods. You feel you don't have the goods. You're not as good as that person sitting next to you in the seminar who's always getting her work in on time, and I can still imagine that woman's face today after many decades, I can tell you that, who always smiled, who always spoke up in the seminar, who always seemed to be on top of it. I mean, you know, these are the people that you have to learn to control your hatred about. But it comes out of a sense, again, that you're inadequate, or that you're posing as something that you're essentially not. And it's a very, very, very difficult thing to get over. But you have to acknowledge that you are not alone in all of this. What you really want to do is, you know, look in that mirror and see somebody really far greater than you are. Perhaps somebody that, an ideal of yourself you're really trying to reach to. And that's a lot of what the graduate student experience is about too. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens by really putting yourself through everything you're now committed to be doing. We are all in the same boat on this. I can tell you again, as an academic, as a dean, these experiences don't go away, but you recognize them, you understand that you share them with everybody else you're working with, or you've studied with, or that you live with and talk to. Here's another Jorge Cham piece that points us to something else that's definitely worth talking about here. I don't want to step too far out of the camera. You can see it. This is really all about surviving grad school by not being too paranoid about I say too paranoid because paranoia comes with being a grad student, but being too paranoid about your advisor or your supervisor. How many people here are doing a course-based master's, non-research-based master's? Little less than a quarter of you. You will still have advisors, you still have profs. Those of you who are doing research-based or thesis, dissertation-based programs, you'll have a supervisor and a supervisor committee. So that relationship, as we heard earlier, is a very, very critical one. I don't go fishing with my supervisor, but not everybody is so lucky. I don't fish, and nobody's ever asked me to go, but I do have a very, very good, close relationship with my supervisor. In fact, I just did a book review for his journal a couple of weeks ago. I would always say yes to anything he ever did. I still have that respect and even reverence for his brain and his ability and the fact that he tolerated me for about 6 years through a master's and graduate and PhD program. But it's that sense of disconnectedness or detachment or distance from your advisor or supervisor you want to overcome. And a lot of that has to do with you. Nobody in your graduate program is going to be calling you up very rarely or emailing you regularly to say, how are you feeling about graduate school? Some supervisors will do that, but for the most part, you really are an autonomous human being expected to make connections with your supervisor, check in, make eye contact, really important. Don't avoid the hallways where they appear. Show up, be friendly, not too friendly, that's a whole other story. But we laugh, but it's a very interesting relationship. It's a really tricky thing. You're equal and not equal. You're being evaluated and you're being coached. And those two things, not surprisingly, engender the kind of paranoia I'm talking about that comes with graduate school experience. I can tell you as a supervisor, and again, I'm sure Dr. Kachnowski and Dr. Reynolds would agree, that most of the time you're really not thinking about your grad students. You're thinking about your own paranoia, your own deadlines, your own research, and your own work you have to do. So if you think your supervisor is waking up in the morning thinking, where is that bloody paper? Where is that report? Where is that analysis? You're wrong. It just doesn't work that way. We've got other, sometimes even less important things to think about. Work with your supervisor, really, really important. Does anybody here not get any of this reference? This year's theme, by the way, I usually theme these according to whatever's current in your popular cultural spectatorship inventory. This happens to be this year's theme. Very, very important that you face challenges. We all want to be like her. I do, certainly. And have whole armies behind you supporting whatever it is that you need to do for justice and for social progress. And of course, it's really important to take risks. Dr. Reynolds said this. Finding your level of risk, that's partly what graduate school experience is about. Intellectual risks, social risks, personal risks of all kind. It's really what you're challenging yourself all the time. If your program isn't challenging you, maybe you're lucky. Maybe you're coasting through it and you don't need it. But for most of us, there's risk involved in all of this. Here's some interesting information for you, some of it more interesting than others. Canadian universities award approximately 5,000 doctoral degrees to students annually. Those of you who are PhD students, you're part of a small, but by global standards, but growing cohort. Today, the most popular fields of study in graduate school, business and management, then finance and accounting, followed by international relations, engineering, law, and education. Interesting. So you're probably, many of you here, probably outside those spheres. These just happen to be, at least in North America, the most popular areas. When I was a grad student in the pre-Cambrian era, certainly business and management were very low, interestingly enough, on the list. I was an English student, film studies student, art students, and studying humanities wasn't maybe not sexy, but it was certainly much more valued socially than I think it is today. But I would still argue that, of course, the value of any program you're in is only as good as the value you bring to it and what you'll do with it. The average age of doctoral graduates at graduation is 35 years old. So most of you look much younger than that, so I hope it doesn't take you 10 years to finish your degrees. And here's the average. Doctoral students, anyway, take an average of 5 years and 9 months to complete. That means there are some finishing in 9 years and some finishing in 3 years, or even, well, 3 years is kind of the minimum. 4 to 5 years is what we really expect. Master's students, if you're in a course-based master's, a year and a half at the most. District thesis or research-based masters, 2 years. The programs are designed for 2 years. Some of you take 3. Some I know take longer. Life happens and interferes, of course, but these are the averages. This is the statistic that almost everybody who's ever come to these orientations remembers. I ran into somebody the other day. She said to me, "Oh, I was at your grad orientation a few years ago. I remember that slide about marriage." That's the only thing she remembered out of this whole morning. So this is what you're going to remember. The majority, 69% of students are married at the time they receive their PhDs. 36% have dependent children, and half of these find a mate during grad school. So half of that percentage come into graduate school married, and about a third of them divorce. I don't usually put that up, but that's current statistic. You know, you go into different fields and stuff happens. But what's interesting, and why people remember it, or remember this statistic, because I always say, you know, there could be, your future mate could be in this room. So if you know, look around the room right now over the next hour or two, there might be some chemical activity happening that will make you part of the statistic that has not changed. This statistic has not altered in about 10 years, interestingly enough. This is really interesting too. Married men show better outcomes than single men. Obviously, somebody's doing the dishes for you or something like that. The same outcomes for women, which is really interesting. Married women or single women in grad school finish at the same, it doesn't matter. One doesn't finish earlier or later. So, you know, go discuss what that means, but just it's an interesting, significant statistic. Overall, 7 out of 10 graduates state their primary source of funding during grad school comes from fellowships, scholarships, research, or teaching assistantships. I imagine what else would be like independently wealthy? What else would it come from? We give good support at Memorial, and if you're keeping up your grades, that fellowship support will stay with you. Today, in Canada, more than 200,000 students pursuing full and part-time grad studies in this country. That number is growing. Memorial is well ahead of the pack in terms of growing that number really rather radically. PhD graduates have a significant impact on Canada's long-term economic prosperity, contributions to innovation, productivity, growth through research and educational activities that Dr. Kachanowski spoke of, and I think it's fair to say to some degree the same is true, of course, for master's students. And science and business students appear to have higher pay expectations, maybe not the reality, but higher expectations compared to arts, humanities students. And PhD grads have a median income of $65,000. That's not bad in this country. $65,000 will get you a lot of beer in this country. Graduates who plan to take a postdoctoral position, so after graduate school, you can't let go. You have to keep doing your research, or it's a stepping stone towards something else you want to do. have a median income of, it's interesting, less than the incoming or the entry-level salary, but it's about $54,000. Those who plan to directly enter the market have a median income $72,000. These are very fresh statistics, just giving you something to think about here in terms of situating where your own mortgage planning might be over the next few years. In 2007, so that's a few years ago now, this is the last really hard stat we have on this. Largest earnings gap existed between the bachelor's and master's levels, suggesting that investing in further postgraduate work is financially beneficial. Is this gap shrinking? It is shrinking a little bit. But it's clear that, again, as I said, the more advanced degrees you have, the better your job market prospects are. Major factor in predicting future earnings, career success is family background. Really interesting. It's, of course, not universally true, but it is largely true. Those students who've had a lot of support, a lot of family encouragement, people who taught you how to read, who took you to school, who followed up, who did homework with you, encouraged you to go on to university, pursue whatever you want, follow your heart, not just necessarily the job market. These are the students who succeed. And the average salary difference between master's and PhD graduates is only 7% right now, which is kind of interesting too. We could be spinning and talking about all of this at length. Now, I always put this slide up because it's great. Just give you a moment to look at it. It means absolutely nothing. There might be students here who have absolutely no idea what Pac-Man is, which just shows you how far life is advanced. These are useful websites. You don't have to memorize them, but there's really every good reason to visit our webpage regularly. Ashley manages it. Lots of information there. All the websites that take you to funding opportunities, scholarships especially, lots of other scholarship opportunities and support opportunities, Memorial, you might not yet be aware of. One vital piece of information, if you think that your graduate supervisor, advisor, head of your department, or your department, whoever is responsible for communicating information about grad school events or scholarship opportunities or conferences, if you think you're not getting that information, speak up, exercise that larynx, make sure you take control of your own university career, and that way you will gain the edge. I just want to say a word about the EDGE program. Again, it's part of our website offerings. You will see there that what we have is a whole suite of professional development opportunities for you that include the whole range of work-related and graduate student learning-related skills. And I'm not going to go into all of them now, but it's called EDGE. That's the package, if you will, from which you could choose all kinds of workshops and options. We've got a whole bunch of them. Go there for EDGE. We're quite proud of it. We really sophisticated. We've turned that site and these offerings into really quite a sophisticated package. One of my successful grad students, he's looking a little constipated, I know, but just to tell you, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Adam was a PhD student, science fiction, 20th century science fiction and English, really successful, got a big Canada graduate scholarship, $35,000 a year for 3 years. That sure helped. He's now teaching. He's got a full-time job at Concordia University, teaching English science fiction in Montreal, just first time after years of doing sessional and part-time work, so we're all very excited about that. That's where your life can be, right? Very happy. Not everybody's smiling. They just don't know how to do it yet. The whole point is that you'll end up on top of the world, of course, in the best possible way and feel very proud of yourself. Long way from the imposter syndrome, of course. And ultimately, it's all about your success. Make sure that you count on us to support you in that, because that's what we're here for. Thanks for your time and your attention. Good luck with everything.